What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Bleeding BnG. This is episode 5. I'm so excited. I know we missed last week's episode. Sorry, guys, we had some technical difficulties, but we have a lot of information to cover to wrap up February. So, like I was saying, guys, this is episode 5. Today is February 25th, so we're going to put a bow on all the news and notes that we received in February since our last episode, where we dealt with our mock off-season episode, and then to tell you guys what we'll be doing in March. So in March, as we lead up to the draft throughout March and April, we're going to have a lot of draft coverage and a lot of free agency coverage. So in the next coming months, between, like I said, March and April, we're going to be having draft profiles on the podcast. We're going to be doing, positional breakdowns, our top 5 draft prospects at each position, and I'm thinking about doing it in the line of the biggest or the highest need or the highest position of need for the Washington football team. So rather than just go the basic, starting with the linemen, then going outside to the receivers, to the quarterbacks, to the running backs, I think I'm going to do it in order of the highest potential preference of prospects for the position that the Washington football team needs. So for example, the defensive line will probably be last because we already have about 4 or 5 studs on the line. Looking back at the roster, we may look at the quarterbacks first, or maybe a receiver, because those are the positions that we're severely lacking at as of this moment. So like I said, that's what we'll be doing in March and April. So please look forward to all those coming episodes. But today in episode 5, we're just going to wrap up what we've learned in February and all the information regarding the Washington football team in February. So I do want to start, like I said, it's February 25th, and this past week, or during this week, Alex Smith had an interview with GQ where he had a lot of scathing remarks about his situation or his dilemma with the Washington football team last year. He said that he threw a wrench in the team's plans when he decided to return. He said that the team didn't want me, and along with a plethora of scathing remarks that he mentioned to GQ throughout the interview. And it kind of threw me off by surprise because, since Alex's tenure when he came in 2018, all we've known is Alex to be a stand-up guy. So these comments, really threw a monkey wrench in what my perception of him as a person. I've always thought of Alex as, this high character guy, like I said, with this warrior mentality, fighting back from his injury or fighting back from what he sustained in 2018. But these comments they seem like they came out of left field, because if we look back and, we put context to Alex's comments, we initially going into the training camp thought, that Dwayne Haskins was the future of the team, and he was going to be competing with Kyle Allen. Kyle Allen was brought in at the beginning of last free agency. So I don't necessarily think that Alex's comments hold a lot of weight, because if we look back contextually, a lot of the things he said just doesn't add up. Of course, a franchise isn't going to be holding out hope for somebody that suffered an injury as gruesome as Alex Smith. Now, he did come back and, prove all the doubters wrong, even myself, by going 5-1. But ultimately, he did sustain another injury that caused another setback and forced him to not, be able to play in the playoff game, in the Super Wildcard Weekend game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So, like I said, Alex, I don't know if he, I don't know what side of the bed he woke up on the morning of this interview, but a lot of these scathing remarks are just throwing me off. And I'm pretty sure it's safe to say that Alex won't be returning next year. In my previous episodes, I said that I don't want him back. And while I was saying that, and while I did believe that he wasn't going to come back, my biggest thing was I didn't want him to come back at that $24 million price tag that he currently holds. Now, if he was brought back as maybe, a bridge QB, a option, a third option QB, somebody that's being brought back in emergency situations, kind of like when Taylor Heineke was the quarantine quarterback last year, I could see a scenario prior to this interview where that could happen, that could work out for Alex. Because I think Brian Mitchell said it best after he heard the comments from the interview. But he said, the Washington football team, that franchise was doing Alex a favor. He said he knows that about 50% of the league would have cut Alex Smith right then and there. And I agree with him. So for Alex to, just go off all the rails, and like I said, this text was in print, so we don't know the tone that Alex said these comments in, the demeanor that was present when he said these comments, but the text does not look good. Like I said, Alex said, he basically said the team didn't want him. And if we look back at some of the comments that Ron said during, training camp and leading up to the quarterback battle between Haskins and Allen, and when, reporters would ask, is Alex's name in the debate? Is Alex up for the race? Ron would say, Alex would just have to show that he could, keep himself healthy, keep himself out of harm's way. So I've never really thought that Ron's, comments leading up to Alex actually coming in showed somebody that was discouraging Alex of returning. So I'm not sure what's really going on back there with Alex Smith, but I'm pretty sure everybody in the Washington football team community is pretty safe to say that we're leaning towards Alex Smith not returning as a part of this franchise in 2021. Like I said, it was a small chance that he returned, not at that $24 million price tag, but with these remarks, I think the franchise is just ready to be done with him in all. So in other quarterback news, moving on from the past, let's look forward to the future. So I told you guys, I think that it was in episode 3 that Sam Darnold was rumored to be on the market, and that a lot of teams were looking at draft packages or trade packages for Sam Darnold that regarded a first round pick. And in the concurrent weeks since that last episode, the trade package's value has seemed to gone down. Now they're saying that Sam Darnold can be had for a high second round pick, and other late round picks. And this is exactly what I proposed to you guys in that episode when I was talking about Sam Darnold. Like I said in that episode, Sam Darnold came in as a high status first round draft pick, and he has done nothing to uphold that status. All he has done is dwindle that light. So like I said, while I do like some of the traits that Sam Darnold does bring, I do think he has a pretty strong arm, and I think that he can be a reclamation project and somebody that can be groomed over time, because he's still young, entering his 4th season in the league. But he's not somebody that I'm going to be giving up the farm for, especially not in a package similar to when we're hearing that Deshaun Watson's on the rumor mill. Now we're hearing that Russell Wilson's on the rumor mill. So yeah, Sam Darnold is nowhere along the lines of that, so I won't be giving him a first round package, especially not 19, because there's a lot of value that you can get in 19, especially in this draft. So like I said, and I hate to be that guy to be like, I told you so, but I never saw a package, or I never saw that a feasible package would be brought up where we'll be trading, or we'll have to trade, let alone one first round draft pick for Sam Darnold, but multiple first round draft picks for Sam Darnold, because he just hasn't shown to be that guy. Like I said, he does have some traits there, but he was supposed to be the elite guy coming out of USC. A lot of that pre-draft process, Sam Darnold was the number 1 quarterback until the Browns came and surprised a lot of people by selecting Baker Mayfield first. I think that news came out within the couple of days leading up to the draft, but they had Sam Darnold ranked above Lamar Jackson in that draft, Josh Allen in that draft, along with Baker Mayfield. So he was looking out to be a stud. A lot of people were expecting him to go to New York and to turn that franchise around, solely, despite everybody knowing how bad that franchise was. And he has shown so far that he's just not that generational guy, that quarterback that, you can line up around a bunch of nothing, and he's just going to turn, a bunch of nothing into filet mignon, but that's saying, they turn SpaghettiOs and into filet mignon. He's not that guy. He's not a Peyton Manning type guy. He's not a guy that they probably thought that they were drafting when they drafted him high in the first round in 2018. So, with that being said, I can only see his value in the league, or his status in the league, only diminishing. It's only diminishing. So, like I said, he started out as a high value draft pick, but he hasn't even spent a season where he cracked the 3,000 yard mark. So, I would be crazy to mortgage my future or to leverage my future for Sam Darnold by giving up the farm, especially a first round pick in this draft. When I said, I believe that we're this close to competing for a championship, that's not something that good organizations do. And like I told you guys in episode 2, I believe that the Washington football team is aligning themselves to be, a good organization that's going to be here for the long haul. So that's, if that's having short-sighted moves to, prevent bad long-term contracts or trading for bad long-term players. That's not what, that's, theory and the philosophy that I got from, the Mayhew and Herney presser was that's not what they're in the business of. They're in the business of doing good foundational, solid groundwork and bringing in the right players on the right deals to, extend this window. Because like I said, I think this window is pretty short, especially, when you have to pay the people on the D line as much as you do, hopefully, or, hopefully, they all get their bread, or hopefully, they're all on a Washington football team where we're able to extend all of them. But, that window isn't as long, especially with these 3, 4, 5-year contracts that get shelved out in the NFL now. So that's it about Sam Darnold. So like I said, the trade package for Sam Darnold has seemed to dwindle down. The value for Sam Darnold has seemed to die out a little bit. So like I said, the news coming out is that he can be had for a high second and a couple late round draft picks. And I would definitely do that for Sam Darnold. Like I said, he's not a guy that I would trade the farm for, but I do like some of his traits. I do think he has a live arm. I do think that, he showed against the Denver Broncos that he has some speed, some athleticism to make off-platform throws. I like Sam Darnold. I just don't think he's the guy that you trade the house for, that you mortgage your future for, like I said before. So I'll be all in the market of, trading those trade packages that's coming out now with the second round pick and maybe, a fifth or sixth in the future, or a fifth or sixth in 2020. Because we do need a quarterback. Like I told you guys at the beginning of this podcast series in episode 1, while I love Taylor Heineke, while I love Kyle Allen, I don't think that they're that guy to put you over the top. And if we're going to be trading for a guy, or if we're going to be leveraging our future for a guy, that guy needs to be that generational talent that puts you over the top, that has you going from the Super Wild Card weekend where everybody in the Washington football team is like, oh man, we gave the Tampa Bay Buccaneers the best fight in the playoffs, to actually competing for the Super Bowl, to actually having some tangible things to latch on to, not just, oh man, we just, we put up the best fight against the Super Bowl champion. I'm not in the business of moral wins. I'm not, especially, in the business of the NFL where money is on the line, people's livelihood is on the line. Moral wins is not something that's invited over here. So like I said, if we are going to mortgage the future or leverage the future, which I'm not opposed to doing, it needs to be for a needle mover. It needs to be for a Deshaun Watson, who's a proven commodity. It needs to be for a Russell Wilson, whose name is being brought up around, the rumor mill nowadays. Or, if it's an unproven commodity in the draft, I think that Trey Lance has displayed some generational qualities and traits that can make him that guy to be a needle mover. I don't know if you're going to be able to draft, Trevor Lawrence or Zach Wilson, but I think that Justin Fields has exuded some of the traits that, he can potentially be a needle mover if you leverage the right amount of picks and don't give up way too much draft capital where, you're mortgaging your future and shrinking that window that I talked about. So like I said, I'm all in the favor of trading for our quarterback, because I don't think that our needle mover at the quarterback position is on the roster right now. With that being said, like I said, this is February 25th. So in the latest episode of I Am Athlete, that is Brandon Marshall's podcast, with featuring the likes of Fred Taylor, Chad Ochocinco, and Cam Newton, they actually had Cam Newton and Channing Crowder, but they actually had Cam Newton on the episode this week, where they was asking Cam about his future, his playing future, and what he plans on doing next year. And they actually brought up the situation in Washington. And, Cam didn't downplay it. He didn't say, no, I'm not going there. He said basically it's in God's hand. And while, Chad Ochocinco and Brandon Marshall were hyping up Terry McLaurin. If you guys don't know, Chad Johnson might be Terry McLaurin's biggest fan. Go look at our post that we did on Monday of the clips, on Tuesday, of the clips where Chad Johnson was just talking glowingly about Terry McLaurin in the I Am Athlete podcast. And then he did a podcast that released just a couple weeks ago with Busting At The Boys with former Washington football team linebacker Will Compton and Taylor Lewan, where he was raving about Terry McLaurin as well. He said that boy's special. He said he told Cam, that boy's the dog that you need on your offense. So, Cam started liking what Chad was, spilling to him, what Chad was preaching to him. So with that being said, like I said, Cam didn't downplay, maybe, potentially reuniting with Ron Rivera. He even gave him the Riverboat shout out during the podcast. But in today's episode or today's show, of the the B Mitch and JP Finley's new radio show on 106 Sam the Fan. He said that Washington didn't go after Cam Newton in 2020 for a reason, and don't expect that in 2021. And while like I told you guys at the beginning of the I think in episode 3 when I was comparing the quarterbacks that were on the market that may potentially be Washington football team players in 2021, I did say that Cam Newton looked like a shell of himself. But currently, I don't think that there's a quarterback on the roster right now that's better than Cam Newton. Yeah, we had a 1-game sample and a couple quarters of Taylor Heineke, but I won't put that to the MVP career that Cam Newton has had up until this point. Even in the episode on I Am Athlete that I previously mentioned, Cam talked about how he came out guns a-blazing. But once he returned from COVID, he said that he was foggy-minded and he doesn't want to really attribute it all to COVID. But he said that the Patriots basically wait for anybody. So he missed nearly 2 weeks of practice, and they implementing new systems, new plays, new motions, and he was just lost. And it looked like that when he returned. Cam looked, like I said, he threw for over 400 yards in week 2. He didn't even look like he had his legs under him in week 1, but he beat a good Miami Dolphins team. So Cam Newton, like I said, I did think he was a shell of himself, but listening to him explain a lot of his play, and like I said, it's not always about what the players say, because the players are always going to have their best interests at heart. They're always going to think that they did the best that they could. But the things that Cam explained, it looked like it on the field. It looked like he wasn't locked in with his receivers, let alone having receivers that didn't give him any separation. And Jacoby Myers and N'Keal Harry. I know that we don't have the best receivers here, but at least Terry McLaurin is 10 times better than both of those guys. Terry McLaurin is going to be a guy that at least gives you separation right off the line of scrimmage. So like I said, while I was opposed to Cam potentially joining us before, after hearing his explanation, hearing how determined he sounded in that interview with I Am Athlete with Brandon Marshall and Chad Ochocinco, I'm kind of warming up to it. Because like I said, I don't believe that there's a quarterback on the roster right now that's better than Cam Newton. There's not. Kyle Allen who? No. There's a reason why even when Cam was hurt and Kyle Allen went, what he went, 4-0, 5-0 in his first couple of games with Carolina, they were talking about if Cam came back, that's Cam's job. Kyle Allen not getting that job because everybody knows. And that was just in 2019. That was just 2 years ago. Now, granted, Cam never came back, and he hasn't looked like himself since, but I still think that he's better than Kyle Allen at this point. I do still think he's better than Taylor Heineke at this point. What we do have to remember, guys, is that Taylor Heineke didn't even start for the XFL team at this time last year that he was on. He didn't even start for the XFL team that he was on at this point last year. And like I told you guys, he showed a tremendous amount of heart. He's living the American dream right now with somebody, that took their opportunity and grasped it. And, he's making $4 million of the year, which is amazing backup quarterback money, which I think he is. Because we also have to remember, guys, the news that Taylor Heineke was starting against Tampa Bay didn't come out until 1 or 2 days before the game. So we can't act like Todd Bowles and that special defense that shut out Drew Brees, that shut out Tom Brady, not Tom Brady, that shut out Drew Brees, that had Aaron Rodgers dancing in the pocket, that shut out Patrick Mahomes. We can't act like if Todd Bowles and that defense had a week to game plan that game wouldn't have gone any differently. We will be fools. We will be fools to think of that. We will be fools to think otherwise. Like I said, we did amazing against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but there were some of the factors that were leaning in our direction that caused us or that resulted in that performance. And while I'm not knocking it, we just have to be realists at the end of the day. So, moving past the quarterback news. Closing that up, wrapping it up with Cam Newton. I do want to get to some off-season news, some NFL free agency news. So the franchise tag window actually opened on Tuesday, February 23rd, and I believe that there's really only 2 options on the market for the Washington football team to franchise. The first one would be Brandon Scherff, who actually received the franchise tag and played on the franchise tag last year. If he received the franchise tag this year, this will be his second year on it, so he will receive 120% of the average of the top 5 guards contracts in the NFL. So that will result in about $18 million per year, which is a lot of money that you're paying a guard, even if the guard is as good as Brandon Scherff. And listening to Cooley on Kevin Sheehan's podcast earlier this week, he said while Brandon Scherff did earn that accolade of first team All Pro. He didn't really see an elite player this year, especially for somebody who's missed 16 games over the last 3 seasons. So essentially, he's missed a third of his playing time over the last 3 seasons. So is that somebody that you technically want to pay $18 million for? So that's something that I want you guys to think about. Now, if he signed a top of the market deal, if he's looking to break a bank for a long term deal, would be maybe about 15 to 16 million. I think Brandon Burks for the Eagles, who was hurt this past year, is the highest paid guard right now, and he's making around 14 million per year. So like I said, I would love to bring Brandon Scherff back, but we got to remember, guys, Brandon Scherff was drafted as an old rookie. He was nearly 25 years old when he was brought in. So yes, he's ending, his year after, he played on his rookie deal and he played this last year on his franchise tag, but he's on the wrong side of 30 already. So we got to be smart with these moves because we have to keep our window open as long as possible, especially with this young defense. So we got people on this defense that's 6 years younger than Brandon Scherff and have only played about 3 or 4 less years than him because he came in at such a, older age. So like I said, he's one of the options that I would consider franchise tagging. And if we do a franchise tag with Brandon Scherff, I would hopefully think that would be a placeholder to just buy us some time to get a long-term deal done, because I would hate for him to play on an $18 million per year, $18 million contract, and he'll be essentially just playing that out for 1 year. And then after that, same thing with Kirk Cousins. Once a player signs that second franchise tag, they're typically gone after the next year because the money becomes too astronomical, and then they're already having bitter feelings because the organization felt like they weren't deserving of a long-term deal. So if Brandon Scherff, he's one of the, he's one of the few players that actually has a little bit of leverage when signing the franchise tag. Because do you want to sign a guard at this astronomical amount? But what do we have behind him? Sadiq Charles is an unproven commodity. I did like Wes Streitzer when he came in, but he played primarily on the left side, and he's been primarily on the left side for the majority of his career. I know he played primarily on the left side when he was with the Atlanta Falcons before he joined us. So, that's a lot of things that you have to consider when trying to franchise Brandon. You got to remember, this is a special case because he is going to be on his second year being franchised, and that 120%, he'll be making way more than any other guard in the NFL. And as a guard of impact, like I said, Brandon Scherff is great. I love Brandon Scherff. I love what he brings to the team. I love what he brings to the football field every day. But as a guard that impactful of a position that's going to move the needle. I'm all about needle movers, if you can't tell. That's one of my favorite terms. Is a guard going to move the needle and going to have you competing or moving from the Super Wild Card weekend of the playoffs and have you competing for the Super Bowl? I'm not sure, especially when he's not as elite as a lot of people think, with somebody earning, that first team All-Pro accolade. And then I want to go into the second person that I think is a candidate for the franchise tag, and that's Ronald Darby. If you guys listened to the last episode 4, you guys know how I feel about Ronald Darby. Ronald Darby played on a prove-it deal this year, and he proved it. He's a hometown kid. Like I said on the last episode, he told Granddaddy when he was on 106.7 The Fan, he hope and prays that he comes back. Darby played on some of his best football of his career this season as a Washington football team player. Somebody that's top 3 in pass deflections in the NFL. While I know it's not interceptions and I know he's not taking the ball away, that shows that he's in the right position over and over again. The only year that I think Darby played better than he did this season was maybe his first 2 years in Buffalo. But after that, there was a regression in Philly. I don't think he had a better season in Philly in any of his years in Philly than he had this year. And I think that he's actually worth the money. So if we do have to franchise tag Ronald Darby, while I would preferably, sign him to a 3 or 4 year long-term deal around $11 to $12 million per year, a franchise tag at $15 million for this 1 year wouldn't be too bad. And this will be his first year signing that, so he'll receive the average amount of the top 5 cornerback contracts in the NFL, which is around $15 million per year. So he wouldn't essentially be breaking the bank like Scherff, and he plays a much more impactful position at cornerback, where he's guarding, the league's best receivers play in and play out. So Ronald Darby, if it comes down to it, I would hate to have to lose him. I would want the franchise tag as a last resort. Like I said, I'm in favor of signing him to a long-term deal because he's still fairly young. If I'm not mistaken, he's either 26 or 27. I think he's about 27. So a lot of his best football is still ahead of him unless he gets injured. But he showed this year that he could, that he was coming back from that ACL, and he was fully recovered finally this year, and he played through injury. I don't think he missed a game this past season. So Ronald Darby and Brandon Scherff are two potential franchise tag candidates, and if it comes down to it, I would rather that go to Darby because like I said, I think he's he plays a more impactful position. While I don't think he's a better player than Brandon Scherff, I think he plays a more impactful position on winning, and his deal won't break the bank. Yes, he'll essentially be, paid top 5 cornerback money, but at $15 million per year, that's what a lot of the top 5 guys are making. That's why that money is where it is, because these guys are making an impact, and a lot of these guys aren't even leaving the league, aren't nowhere near Ronald Darby as far as top of the league in pass deflections. A lot of these guys is ranked in the top 5, top 10, top 7 of pay scales for a cornerback. They didn't have a season as well as Ronald Darby, so even having them play on that franchise tag for 1 year maybe a steal. It may be a steal, and you never hear that when dealing or talking about franchise tags. So just wrapping up some of the news that we dealt with or that we've heard throughout February, I wanted to go through 2 wide receivers that were actually connected to us from 2 well-renowned, respected NFL writers. The first one was Albert Breer had a piece where he was talking about projections and the NFL free agency, and he projected that Curtis Samuel from the Carolina Panthers, who was drafted out of the Ohio State University, he had Curtis Samuel actually signing a deal with Washington. He talked about how Curtis Samuel and Terry McLaurin came into Ohio State in the same class as 2014, even though Curtis Samuel has a couple more years experience than Terry. He said, why not reunite those guys? Both of those guys bring you 4.3 speed, and they seem to have the chemistry already there to work in unison and work alongside each other to produce. And I actually love the idea. Curtis Samuel isn't number 1 on my list, like I told you guys in the last episode with the mock offseason episode. While I am in favor of bringing in Allen Robinson, even if you have to break the bank, I am not mad at settling for Curtis Samuel. Curtis Samuel is a playmaker. I saw even I think my boy Steve from Twitter, shout out to Steve NFL. A lot of you guys in the Washington football team community know who I'm talking about. I saw that he had a stat that said that Curtis Samuel had more touchdowns than Allen Robinson on less touches over the 3-year span. So if we look at Curtis Samuel and what he did in the 2020 season and that new offense under Joe Brady, that college style offense that Matt Rule and Joe Brady brought into the NFL from their time with Temple, Baylor, and LSU. Curtis Samuel had 851 receiving yards and 200 rushing yards. So he had a total of 1,051 all-purpose yards. And he's a lightning in a bottle, like with the ball in his hands. He's very dynamic with the ball in his hands. He had a huge run against Washington. I think he even scored a touchdown against Washington in their last meeting. So that's somebody, everybody's trying to replicate Kansas City's offense, even though I'm not sure they want to do that after this Super Bowl, where it's speed all the time. So pairing somebody like, Curtis Samuel, who runs a 4.3, pairing him with Terry McLaurin, who runs 4.3. Also pairing him with Antonio Gibson, who's a tank, who's 230 pounds and running 4.3. That's where you get those mismatches all over the field. That's where you open up the field so you don't even need a dynamic quarterback because everybody's running away from everybody. All you got to do is get a quarterback to just drop it in the bucket and put it there. That's what happens when you get those dynamic offenses. Like I said, I think that Patrick Mahomes might go down as the greatest quarterback of all time. But his job is really easy when Tyreek Hill is running by everybody because he's so much faster than everybody. When he throws a jet touch pass to Mecole Hardman, and it's actually a run, but he gets accredited for a pass because he moved his hands forward, and Mecole Hardman takes it 40 yards around the edge. Of course, the stats are going to look better. That's a completion behind the line of scrimmage that I gave 40 yards off of. That's what speed does to an offense. That's why Kansas City has seemed to make it so easy against everybody except Tampa Bay. But like I said, I would love the move of bringing Curtis Samuel to Washington. Like I said, he's 5'11", 195 pounds, so he can play in the backfield like he did this past season. You can put him in 2-back sets, 3-back sets. He can play in the slot with his size, and he can move outside. He can play boundary every now and then. He has decent enough releases. While I don't think he's the best route runner, he can get open on the outside. So I think that bringing Curtis Samuel in would definitely make your offense very, very dynamic. And then the last piece of news that I did want to go over today is that Gil Brandt, a long time NFL writer, he's been in the NFL for over 50 years. He said that he actually sees a scenario where Will Fuller from the Houston Texans can actually be brought in to Washington. And I actually made this prediction earlier in the season, like during the regular season, even before Will Fuller got suspended for his HGH suspension. But Will Fuller, he was showing a lot of capabilities being his first year as the number one receiver. He was scoring touchdowns week in and week out. I think he had like a six touchdown game streak this past season, and he's somebody, he may be even faster than Curtis Samuel, even coming off the multitude of injuries that he had. He's somebody that I think ran 4.32 4.31 at the combine, so he's even somebody that opens it up. While he doesn't do it as many dynamic ways as Curtis Samuel, out the backfield, off reverse, off pitches, off sweeps and things like that, he is a deep ball threat. And my boy Steve, I'm sorry, I gotta bring you up again, Steve, but my boy Steve made a good point when I was replying to Brent's article last night. Because it kind of baffled me that I haven't really, Washington is looking for receiver help, and that I've never really, heard anybody other than myself connect Will Fuller's name to the Washington football team. And Steve said, a lot of Will Fuller's success is predicated off the deep ball, and nobody on the roster right now really excels at the deep ball. That's not their strength. So that would bringing in Will Fuller be a waste of a signing? And like I told Steve last night, with me bringing in Will Fuller, because Steve was absolutely right. Great job, Steve, and that's a great analysis. But like I told you last night, or like I told Steve last night, I think that my thinking aligns with Gil Brandt is that the quarterback that's going to be starting for Washington in 2021 isn't on the roster right now. So I think that we can still potentially bring in somebody who has those deep ball traits, like a Trey Lance. I'm going to keep banging down that Trey Lance door, guys. I love Trey Lance. I've fallen in love with Trey Lance over the draft process. So like I said, bringing in somebody like him, even like the off-the-wall names we heard, like Derek Carr throws a pretty good deep ball. Justin Fields, while his deep ball isn't the greatest, he can get it there. And with work and with practice with an NFL coaching staff, he can work on his accuracy, but he has the arm strength to get the ball there. So, like I said, that's a great point, Steve, of bringing up how a lot of Fuller's success is predicated off the deep ball. But can you imagine, him and Terry working the outsides? And I think that Terry is a better, even though he has 4.3 speed as well, I think Terry is a better intermediate route runner than he is a deep route runner. I think Terry still has sometimes trouble stacking receivers, and Will Fuller has shown a knack to do that, even with his slender frame. Even, getting open. And like I said, Will Fuller is coming off of HGH suspension. He'll be missing the first game next year. So with these factors, along with his injury factors that he sustained a lot over his rookie contract, he may be bought in as a slight bargain deal. Because like I said earlier, he did show some traits as a number one receiver this year, and with his first year without DeAndre Hopkins, that woke a lot of people up and like, whoa, Will Fuller's actually more than just a track star or speed demon. He's a pretty good football player. So yeah, that's just it for the news and the notes. For February, hopefully we'll hear some more news and notes leading up into the NFL free agency that's set to start in March, leading up to the NFL draft that's set to start at the end of April. So like I told you guys at the beginning of the episode, we're going to be pushing out a lot of content, a lot of draft content, a lot of free agency content. We're going to be looking at a lot of prospects who can potentially fit the Washington football team, and we'll be breaking down a lot of content. We'll be giving you everything. So like I say every week, can you guys please follow me on my Twitter and my Instagram pages. I will be dropping those tags on this YouTube video, and I will be giving you those for the people that's just listening on podcast only now. My Twitter is at Bleeding BnG. The spelling is BleedinBnG. So it's only one G in the Twitter spelling. And then on my Instagram, the spelling is at BleedingBnG. So it's the regular way you spell bleeding, BnG. So that'll have two G's. And if you guys can, my YouTube fam, if you guys can, I would appreciate you guys subscribe so you guys can get these notifications first, so you guys can get all this insight first, and you guys can have conversations with everybody else in the Washington football team, and you can really sound like you know what you're talking about because you listen to Jalen on the Bleeding BnG podcast. So like I said, thank you guys for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate all the feedback I've been getting. A lot of you guys gave me a lot of feedback about episode 4, especially on my social media pages. A lot of people leaving me Instagram DMs like, keep going, man. I love the moves that you said. So I appreciate it, and I see them, and they don't go unnoticed. So like I said, thank you guys for tuning in to episode 5. Please be on the lookout for episode 6, draft coverage and many more on the way. Thank you.